Come, Holy Spirit, and guide our thoughts as we meditate upon the word that you yourself have inspired. Give us the grace to apply it concretely to our life, which we dedicate to your service. There is a word in Hebrew which says it all. Ichavod. It is the continuous tense which come into the imperfect in our way of putting it, of to glory as a verb. The root of wait, because everything is concrete in Hebrew, is chavod, and they make verbs out of these things, and it's actually there, the word that comes in Ezekiel, the glory of the Lord left the temple. And what we have then, all that condensed in one word, it was gloried. Glory had been there. Now, this comes in to a vision that he has here, Ezekiel, in the end of chapter 10. And it comes here and there in his work, for he sees the magnificence of the temple and the project of God that it should be so. For he has this whole project of a temple, but in fact was never built. But anyway, here we are, verse 18 and following. The glory of the Lord then came out over the temple threshold, came out and paused over the winged creatures. So it's coming out and it's coming over these creatures. Out it comes. These raised their wings and rose from the ground as I watched, and the wheels were beside them. Now his vision had started there by the Chebar, and he'd seen these strange creatures. It was all to do with the glory of the Lord at the beginning, so that's the context of his whole work. They paused at the entrance to the east gate of the temple, with the glory of the God of Israel over them above. This was the winged creature I had seen beneath the God of Israel by the river Chebar. I knew that they were winged creatures. Each had 4 faces and 4 wings, and what seemed to be human hands under their wings. Their faces were like those I had seen by the river Chebar. Each one moved straight forward. Mysticism. It is something that we are engaged in once we are in the realm of the ordained. We are doing on earth what the angels are doing in heaven, and in some cases actually more than the angels are doing in heaven, for it is not given to them to consecrate and to forgive sins. There's also one thing which human beings in general do which angels don't, and that is to suffer. Therefore we can merit. The priest is victim too, and he offers himself in every way. In fact, that comes through also in the council documents, even for the people of God, that they unite their all to the sacrifice at the altar. The document to be bearing in mind always before ordination is Presbyterorum Ordinis of the Second Vatican Council. You have it, eh?
This is interesting. We have entered in Holland into a project of renewed translation of the council documents into Dutch.
Yeah.
And it has been my job to translate the Presbyterorum Ordinis.
That's so?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's interesting.
That's interesting because a few years ago I was given the job of translating a part of the Easter liturgy into Welsh, and we came across things there which are very interesting. For instance, there seems to be the ministeria and not mysteria. I was given by an expert to understand that probably the actual reading of, when it talks about these things, the mysteria are chanting the praises of God, is exalted of the Easter liturgy. Actually, it makes more sense if perhaps down the line they had been actually originally written ministeria.
Yeah.
In other words, we are corresponding on earth, because all this is our realm. We are genuinely the angels of the earth as priests. We are apart from humanity and called to be at the altar where no one else is to come. because we have not less than, but more than they had in the temple here. We have the Sancta Sanctorum, the Devir there, where only the priest, only once a year, was allowed to go. So we have more. All the Old Testament is but a pedagogy. And in fact, we had a reference to the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas this morning in the context of what he did for liturgy, because he actually produced the office as we have it, and therefore the office of benediction as we have it, because that's part of it. And he rightly quoted actually ad Orate Devoti and so on. And in Tantum Ergo, it's all there. And also there we have this novo cedat ritui. In other words, it's all there, and coming now to the fullness. Here we have the fullness of all the types and shadows that were there before us. And since we're in this parenthesis, all the Eucharistic theology of St. Thomas is actually in his hymns, in one particular, Sacra Solemnia, and also in the one which is the sequence. The sequence is sung at Corpus Christi. Yeah, it comes before the Gospel. And it's all there. Normally in parishes or in small assemblies they're missing the last part of it, Ecce Panis Angelorum. But the whole of it is very long, and it's all there. It talks about how the same thing is received by the good and the bad for unequal effects, and what is in the part is in the whole, and so on. It's all there. But also in Sacra Solemnia, we used to have it in the Corpus Christi procession, because in the Carthusian rite they only have one procession a year, and that's the Corpus Christi one, and right around the cloister. But that was sung there, and it's all there. The Eucharistic doctrine is very full, and also things which can be pulled out of there which have been forgotten, because since we're on this theme of the apartness of the priest, it's there also, even in theological terms, by St. Thomas Aquinas, who's in the context of an unquestioned doctrine which goes right back to the Apostles and is continually there in East and West without any questioning, which has been questioned recently in the last, not exactly 50 years, because it wasn't there in the Council, it's in the last 30 years, 40 years, when actually things have crept in and forced the issue. I'm talking about this identity, which is actually there in these words of, he talks about solis presbyteris. Only to the presbyters is it given to tangible, to handle and to give. Handle and feed. You see, that's there in his theology, and it was the theology of the time, that it was one, the consecration of the person was a taking apart. It gave him the power to confect, and exclusively, along with the deacons under certain circumstances, actually use them as the chalice. The giving of, the nourishing, it was one identity, and the touching of God was only given to those who were taken apart from the touching of, for instance, women. You see, it was a taking apart from the normal, and the consecrating of the hands in a very mystical sense. It was a taking apart from the hand exclusively for God. So it was a whole protection of the divine. Because there we were doing what the high priest was doing and more, handling the divine with power divine, which he didn't have. And therefore there's a whole thrust there which we want to be aware of, the backdrop, because we think that we're in a law now, in the current practice. Well, the practice is not necessarily the actual continuation of the thrust of spirituality and protection and in fact theology of the sacraments, which was there for 2,000 years, unquestioned, and is still questioned in the East. What we want to see always is looking over our shoulder to what we have in common with the East until the day, but that's always secure. And some parts of liturgy actually from the earliest text are common. One would be the dialogue before Mass, before the actual Eucharistic prayer, whatever you want to call it. It's the anaphora in Greek, it's the Eucharistic prayer in the West, the canon. But that dialogue with what goes on before it, the Lord be with you and with your spirit. And then in Greek it's there, we have the earliest text, sursum corda, up your hearts, anotakas cardias, the hearts, that goes right back. And it's actually, even in the Roman army, is lift courage lads kind of thing. It's not an old expression. And then gratias agamus Domine Deo nostro, with the gesture that goes actually in the old rite. Let us give thanks. Then going into the hagios, hagios, hagios. You see, it's the East and West have it in common. It's there, the Trisagion. which therefore is common from the earliest times. And therefore other things are also common to East and West, and they have this in common, that there's a coming apart. See, this lifting up of the heart was a coming out of the common, and also things which are in Greek, they resist changes because they still have what they always had there, and there's a notion there also of the unapproachability of God, especially for the hagiatis hagiis, the holy things to the holy ones. You know, they were always aware, and we were aware very much ourselves until we became very much elastic, that coming close to God for any human being presumes a certain purity, sanctity, preparation. We forget that, and it doesn't help Eucharistic discipline or the honour of God to be in any way belittling the majesty of God in the interest of a badly understood either ecumenism or Eucharistic hospitality, which is actually of a questionable nature. It doesn't help the soul to come straight from a grave sin unconfessed. It just it compounds the issue. So we have to kind of somehow get that message across, that genuine help for souls is not to give them an incomplete message, and it doesn't help the Lord or the actual protection of the sacred for the Church itself. It damages. And Pope Benedict was trying to get this message through in 2005, and he was warning about this in the end of his document. Isn't it Sacramentum Caritatis?
I think so.
There's trying discreetly to say, look, he uses the Pauline expression of discerning the body. That when we have situations where there's a full church of people who would not be practicing and therefore not be prepared, we're getting into a position of not discerning the body. They wouldn't know, but we have to know in their name. In Ireland, there is a problem there because people come massively to certain things like funerals, weddings, even months' minds, they call them. That's the month after. Year's minds as well, the year after, and also Christmas and Easter. So the church will be full of these occasions when it's not easy to handle. I find actually at the Latin Mass quite a few people come forward, even adults now. All the children automatically will come forward to have made their first communion, but the adults, some of them would sometimes actually make this sign, even though they could go. That's for blessing, of course. But it does mean that they want all the ways as they can, but they want to go to confession afterwards rather than. Fair play, it's great delicacy. It's a great thing. Yes.
You see that in international communities.
Yes.
In Holland, you would see that in international communities.
Yes. Yes. When you've got a husband who might be married to a Catholic and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but also you know, every Dutchman will go to get communion.
Yeah. Oh.
But students from abroad, or people from abroad, from Spanish countries, or something,
they would be aware.
They would be very much aware.
I see. Yes, that's right. Yeah, we have the culture in English-speaking countries. I had to explain it in my monastery because there was a priest who was helping us one time at communion, and he wasn't. What's going on with this? What is that? They will be American, so they want a blessing. Yeah. So it's very common in places like America and England, and now in Ireland. Anyway, I got onto that to explain this, but it contains it all with regard to what we're at and what is expected of a priest, and also indirectly what menaces a priest. We have to be aware that a priest is a thorough nuisance to the demon, and so he's interested in what he's up to and not up to, and he gets in. And if one looks around, unfortunately, it's those who start off best quite often who end up in a mess. I was quite surprised actually some years later looking back at ordination pictures there in the cathedral in Siena. The young master of ceremonies, I think he was Bishop's secretary, I'm not quite sure, but he was only a young priest, but anyway, he left the priesthood not long after that. And then there was one of the altar boys, there were one of the seminarians therefore, one of the seminarians who was already in theology, I think. He wasn't ordained long and he left the priesthood, he has a child, and so these things, people, one wonders why they start off very well, but there is a whole program actually in the spirituality of the priest is there, and concretely it's there, the protection that our Blessed Lady offers is there, there's a strong hint there, and after the Eucharistic sacrifice itself, there's a strong hint that Marian devotion should be there, and the hint is there, say the rosary every day. That's what it's saying more or less. It's not just saying so many terms, but it's actually clear that the hint is there because these are classically what have given a structure of protection to the priesthood. One doesn't go far wrong when one has the protection of Our Blessed Lady, basically. The Church knows that from experience. And it's a good thing to say the Rosary, even if it's divided up into 5 different parts. It can be said even a decade here, a decade there, in the car or whatever. It can be done. Because if we're just all the time talking and running around, then we're losing control, basically. We have to put the brakes on. So calm ways like that. And also it plugs us somewhat into the East, because they are praying continuously in the classical way of the prayer of the heart. They have the Jesus prayer. Mount Athos, you watch them there in YouTube, you see their lips are moving all the time. Actually, they're praying the Jesus prayer all the time. Well, we can get something of that. Then we can always be in mode of contact, and that's an easy, calm way of doing it. When there's not something which takes all our mind, we can quite easily put in a decade of the Rosary. There we are. By the end of the day, one's got it done. The last decade, we said before. In other words, it does minimize the risk there of just being taken over by pure activism, which is precisely how the demon gets into even young priests and gets them switched off from contact, which keeps them safe, because essentially it's relationship. We have to be in relationship, and that's when we're kept safe, because we're looking at him all the time, we're loving him, we're engaging with him, and the sacraments are the means of sanctification of the priest and all that we're doing. In fact, the great authors will emphasize that the sanctification of the priest is ipso facto in the things that he's doing. He's handling God all the time, so handling God well means his sanctification. It's rather like being a wire which carries electricity when there is electricity passing through it. Well, if the wire then at a certain point is made such that actually it will light up, well, that's what happens to us. All these graces are buzzing through us, and we're handling the wires of power in the sacraments. Well, we need to be somehow heated by them as well, switched on by them, radiate, and make them not just moments of functionality, but genuine encounter. And in that encounter, we let the people encounter the one that we're encountering. We bring them with us as mystagogues. It's very important that people suss straight away a priest who is praying and getting through things. There's a big difference. A disadvantage in Ireland is that we have still a large number of celebrations. They are reacting at last now to bringing them down, but it does mean that to keep the structures that are there, they're going quickly from one altar to the other, one church to another, and so on, and the quality comes down. I know in Europe that you have a reaction against that, which is healthy. I noticed in France already in the early 70s that you would not get a celebration on a Saturday evening or a Sunday going less than an hour, and it was fully sung. I was very edified by that they didn't have that big distinction between the said and the sung. They were all celebrations. Now, these documents are always the bottom line, and there's another one which is also a great help for containing everything in one document. It's Pastores da Bourgogne of Pope St. John Paul II. It contains the whole spirituality of the priest, and it portrays the priest as a person of communion, because we have to be people who are not treating others as numbers. We are in communion ourselves, and we are genuinely engaging at a deep level with all the souls that the Lord in His providence sends us. He will be judged by the way that we've handled these immortal souls the Lord sends us. And people have been put off in the past by being badly handled. The first encounter they have is important. We represent the whole church, and every soul that comes to us will be well received, even if that person comes at a difficult moment for us, because the first reaction might be to push away, but no, it has to be done giving the person the impression that that person counts a lot when he comes. The first impression, in fact, is immediately perceived, whether one is receiving well or badly a person. And it's anything now, a contact on the phone, a text, one perceives there's a warm heart at the other end who cares. And that's a very important means of evangelization. The church cares in us. Each soul was redeemed by the Lord individually. And this then links us to the communion of saints, where all these men of God who have preceded us in the priesthood have taken it seriously, and have taken seriously the challenge that they have not to let a single one be lost. In the high priestly prayer of Christ, in chapter 17 of St. John, we have this word, and you have given them to me, and not one was lost, except the son of perdition. That's a Hebrew phrase, and the son of, everything is concrete. In the Old Testament, there we have in the first book of Kings, they're talking about Elijah. What did he look like? Ahab wants to know, and they reply, he was a son of hares. So that's a little bit, a hairy man. Well, here, the son of perdition, that in the New Translation, the Jerusalem Bible, which we use in church, they have put that no one was lost except the one who chose to be lost. Well, that's a paraphrase, that's the Jerusalem Bible, it doesn't put it in modern terms, what's in the concept. But the son of perdition, that he was inclined towards perdition. And again, the opposite, we have it too, that we are to be ministers of peace and healing and reconciliation by our whole bearing and being. It's in the Lord's invitation to go to a place and to sow peace. When you go to a house, you say, peace upon this house, and if, the actual word that he would have used, if a bar shalom, if a son of peace is there, let your peace tend to descend upon him with. And so we need to be sons of peace, that wherever we are not adding to the problem, not adding to the darkness, not adding to the pain, but in some way healing. And also by our warm humanity, that extends to it, because the first instrument of contact is our humanity. Grace builds on nature, and we're blessed if we have a good bottom line, because some priests are already labouring at a disadvantage by having a dysfunctional humanity, and they're a nuisance to themselves and to others. But we are blessed if we can, just by our presence, warm people. And of course, we have human means of doing that. At every age, the smile is universal, it's ecumenical, it is language completely understood right across the board in any language and culture, and so too are gestures of warmth. The language of the body is the first contact that we have. So these things matter, and we cultivate them for healing on every level. The people coming to our presence in the first instance are healed and not further damaged. And then we have this great means of different levels, according to the culture, of our sense of humour, which the Lord himself used in his own Semitic way, in the sense that when he was talking about the Pharisees, or to the Pharisees, he goes into things like this. Pharisee, straining out a gnat, and swallowing a camel. You see, they weren't amused, I am sure, but there, it's there, you see. He consecrated and sanctified the sense of humour in his own divine and human nature. So it's an invitation to do the same in our own mode. We take what's in the culture, but it's something which opens hearts. Now, this element of conquering for Christ, all the great saints have had it, from the Acts of the Apostles onwards. Look at the heroicity of St. Paul. Now, great founders also often were great fishers of men. And by our ordination we are called to be fishers of men. Not handlers of bureaucracy, but fishers of men. And it's important that we never lose sight of that. All the administration is in view of safeguarding the structures which let the Lord be Lord, but they mustn't be an end in themselves. It's important to know how to delegate. And not delegating the wrong things, because what's crept in is that people are expecting priests in some areas of the church now to be managing directors and to let lay people do what the priest should be doing. And that's a topsy-turvy look at things. The priest's place is with the sick who need him at that part of their life more than ever before. They have a right. Often they've been good people, have given lots and lots of their life to the church, and at the end they're shunted off and no priest comes to see them. They would prefer to see a priest rather than a layperson. And only a priest can absolve. It's not fair just to send people who can't absolve, because basically it's not enough to think of the sacramental system as purely mechanical, as though giving Holy Communion is enough. There's more. The Church has a whole panoply, a whole armory, a whole arsenal of means of getting to souls. And the care of the sick and aged is one of them. The sacrament of the sick and confession, being with them, these are very important, not just handing these through third parties. Now, often these great saints, as also female saints who who do the same in the mystical level, like Teresa of Lisieux, for instance, what she did to have that criminal at the block. She knew there was a criminal refusing absolution and grace, and she was praying and making penance for him. And in the end, just as he was being put to the guillotine, he turned to the chaplain and kissed the crucifix, which was one unexpected. So it was a great victory for Therese in her cloister. Catherine of Siena, our own Catherine, the same. There was Niccolo della Torre. He had been politically very incorrect. He'd said something considered very insulting to the Republic, and he had been put in prison for his pains, and he was actually being beheaded, and he was refusing grace and prayer and all the rest of it. Catherine heard about it and went to see him, young damsel though she was, got to know him, and he became interested in this lady, and he obviously was pulled in her direction for a mixture of motives, but she used what was there to get to his heart and soul so that she could soften him and not get him into the beyond in a situation of complete refusal. And we have some of their correspondence, because she didn't write herself, but we have some of the messages that came through. And apparently he did, before he was about to die, said, if you are there, it'll be like going to a banquet. And she was there, she kept the appointment, and she, as his head was being chopped off, stood by, held the head, and it fell into her hands. And she was covered in his blood. And she comments that it was like a beautiful odour, because she knew that somehow she got through to him. He'd had that final moment of grace, and that whatever had happened, he was okay. All because she had the courage to get there. We have a recent testimony of something similar, but not quite so successful, in Sister Helen Pouget in America, who tried to do the same thing for somebody who was on death row. It was made into a film, a very good film actually. It's called Dead Man Walking.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen it, I know it.
And if you don't see it all, the actual death scene is very moving. Okay. It's close to the truth. She used the same tactic of the fact that she was a woman and that a man might open up to a woman, and he did, slightly, enough anyway. But, well, the question was, because he was a Catholic, you see, he was from a Catholic family, so he knew what was what. She was trying her best, but at least she got him not to die in a situation of complete hardness of heart and hatred. She didn't quite get as far as getting to have the sacraments, but we leave that in the Lord's hands. But you see, these are people who care for the individual, and that's what we do. A parish is not a business. It's one soul plus one soul plus one soul, which make up the parish. They're all individual, they're all universal entities worth dying for themselves. Each one a universe apart, and not a number. And so that's the care that we have. So, here, a typical example would be a very great preacher in history, and often these great preachers are founders themselves. St. Anthony Mary Claret, he was a Spaniard, born in 1807, and he died in 1870. And we have here something of the zeal of the saints. Like St. Catherine of Siena, he couldn't bear the thought of any single one being lost. St. Catherine would come out with this kind of thing: "Oh my God, grant me a place by the gates of hell, that I may stop those who enter there, saying, 'Where are you going, unhappy one? Back, go back, make a good confession, save your soul. Don't come here to be lost for all eternity.'" Now, this saint, Anthony Mary Claret, boldly proclaimed, "The sole reason why society is perishing is because it has refused to hear the word of the Church, which is the word of life, the word of God. All plans for salvation will be sterile if the great word of the Catholic Church is not restored in all its fullness." The word, then, is life-giving. We need not to water down the word, but to know that we have the power by the word to change the destiny of a soul. We have the case of 4 people about to die. The saint, tried to save the souls of the 3 younger criminals. They were all to be executed one morning. 3 boys in their late teens and a man of 40. All 4 had absolutely refused to confess and receive communion. He got through to the younger ones. They made their confessions, and the chaplain prepared to administer them viaticum, the last communion. He asked the young men, according to the custom, if they forgave all who had injured them. 2 replied yes. The third said yes. He forgave everyone except his mother. Archbishop Claret prostrated himself and kissed the boy's feet. My son, if you do not pardon your mother, you will be damned. For God's sake and for my sake, I beg you to forgive her. No. It is on her account that I am in this trouble. If she had punished me in time, I would not be here. I do not forgive her. The 4 prisoners were covered with execution robes, mounted on mules, and led to the scaffold. The moment before his sentence of death was carried out, the unforgiving youth shouted, "I forgive my mother from my heart. Pray for me." Then the older man, the toughest of the 4, held up his arms and asked to confess. Seated on the bench, with his head covered, he confessed and was absolved. Then the 4 men were put to death. Some time after, God revealed to St. Anthony Claret the judgment the 4 had received. In a public conference, he emphatically stated, the 4 criminals of Villafranca were saved. Were you here when I gave the story of a criminal in America in the electric chair? Because at the end of one retreat you weren't here and I gave it.
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Okay, well, since I've already recorded it, I won't give it now, and I'll give it to you personally without recording it, because it's worth hearing, and it gives some idea of the beyond and of the responsibility that we have for one immortal soul. So, for the time being, 2 things. From the moment of ordination, we are engaged in not letting a single soul slip through our hands. I'm going to answer for them if we do. The other is this. We are involved directly with the Blessed Trinity in a way that we forget because we have perhaps, against the positive will of God, let the barrier drop too easily. For which also, when we are responsible unnecessarily, we perhaps may have to respond. Because the Church has laid down the conditions quite clearly when certain things should happen and should not happen. Specifically, the question of anyone at all helping when there's no need has been addressed. There was a document in 1998, it was the declaration, the interdicasterial declaration on the participation of the non-ordained in the ministry of the ordained. Mm-hmm. And that was a powerful one insofar it was signed by different heads of congregation. Ratzinger drew it up, and it was signed then in forma specifica by the Pope, John Paul II, and it was an indication that the normalization, and therefore banalization, of the giving of Holy Communion there by people who are not actually ordained for that, without reason, was something which had to be addressed, because it was not helping the sacramental discipline and certainly not honouring God, because in practice, even a child will see quite clearly the difference when he sees that certain things are done only by certain people and wearing certain clothes. He'll get one message. When he sees Auntie so-and-so doing it in a miniskirt, he'll get another. So even on the level of education, it's quite important that we, when it depends on us, actually do what depends on us, because otherwise we're part of the problem. I don't often have public masses, but occasionally the parish priest will call me if he is stuck, and already a good long time now I've given that clear message that I don't need help on a weekday, and they take that on board. It's questionable, very questionable. And at the most you get 80 on a weekday in Ireland, but that's easily done by one man. And you see, the problem is that it also goes into the tabernacle, and you don't need to be dividing. It's the whole notion of union of celebration and distribution. Take, eat this. There's no need to go to the tabernacle. And also the fact that one then has more than one distribution point. They go halfway down the church. It takes away from the altar, the mensa, that there's actually a sharing. It's actually quite significant. The whole reproduction of the Last Supper is physical. It's not just theoretic. Therefore, the more we see of the Last Supper, the better. And that can be a message which can be understood by people. It's actually correct renewal. And a misunderstanding of participation, when we have to have this. And time, doing it well, letting people receive the grace with its fruits. Concluding straight away the celebration at that high point, without a moment of calm and interiority, is to let the grace evaporate in practice. You don't often make it themselves afterwards, and so we can oblige them in a sense, and for their good, let them calm down when the Lord is there. Calm, calm. The Lord is a Lord of silence, and we need to protect that silence physically, and invite people to do the same, before, during, and after.